Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing after. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. As you know, this past weekend, we lost a true American hero, a person who served this country both in uniform and as a politically elected person for many, many years, a person who had conviction, love of country, and we will miss him. And if you will have a moment of silence for Senator John McCain of Arizona. Thank you. Clerk, if you will call the roll and read the prepared statement.
August 28, 2018. Please be advised this meeting is being taped for audio and video broadcast. The meeting will also be closed captioned, and it's important that everyone speak clearly into the microphones, only one person speaking at a time. Assisted listening devices are available. Thank you. Mr. Burnett.
Present.
Mr. Porcello.
Here.
Mr. Sacchinelli.
Here.
Ms. Smith. Here. Mr. Stern.
Here.
Ms. Melendez.
Here.
Mr. Ioannidis.
Present.
Mr. Dumas.
Here.
Mr. Sims.
Present.
Mr. Kides.
Here.
Ms. Siegelbaum.
Here.
Mr. Hempstead.
Here.
Mr. Sirenides.
Here.
Mr. Igneri.
Here.
Mr. Livingston.
Here.
All 15 present. You have a quorum.
15 present, we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of August 14th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Igneri moves. Any corrections, deletions, omissions? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as submitted? Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Sims, is that opposed?
No, abstention.
Abstention? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4 abstentions. 5. Mr. Livingston. Next item on the agenda, public participation.
Diane Lauricella.
Good evening. Tonight I'd just like to briefly speak about one of the items on the agenda, the South Nora Community Center purchase under Land Use and Building Management. I didn't have time to speak with the chairperson, but I just wanted to convey just some thoughts about this. It's not really the what, it's the how that I have some concerns about. I know in our charter we still are allowed to have a social services agency. And while I think, from what I know about the history of why this building was built and why there were two different agencies, I'm not so sure this was an experiment that worked out in the long run, based upon the performance of both of the entities as they wound down. So tonight, in kind of a saying of two wrongs don't make a right, I would like you to consider to go back to the drawing board and do your due diligence about the following. I did some homework about what this entity is that we would be paying money to, a 501c3 that doesn't appear to be viable. Now the thing is, this city had a chance, as they did with Neon when there were problems, to take back the building without a lot of lawyers, months and years of discussion, and still give those two entities a chance to come back when they straighten out their board and had their money straightened out and they could clarify where the money went. Unfortunately, the first entity ended in bankruptcy. This entity, to my knowledge, and I'm going to hand in 5 pages, some of the online research I did, it's unsure. I am unsure of this time as to who is on the board, whether it's a viable board, whether there are minutes. This is a 501c3 has certain obligations. I helped start one years ago, the River Watershed Association in Norwalk. I've been on many. It's a pain sometimes for small groups, but there are things that they must do. I think it might be better that this city purchase the building. Maybe consider putting together a new department in your grand discussion about reorganization. You could contract out services, but it's time that the public gets a chance. Unfortunately, these 2 entities that were in the building proved that they could not manage the money that they got publicly, public funds, all the time, towards the end. They were invented and created with very good intentions, and they did a lot of good work in our city for people in need and for our citizens and many of the political people that are sitting before me. The thing is, unfortunately, they did not prove themselves to be able to handle public funds in ways that we would expect. So therefore, I'm handing this in. I'd like you to vote no tonight to purchase the building. I would like to ask that you go back to the drawing board, do your due diligence, use the $300,000 to create a new social services agency. And if you need to go to court because South Norwalk Community Center says they are owed this money, that's what the appraised value is, I hope that you will go back and show that this was not a viable entity. The paperwork partially is in, but if they did not function, and it can be proven, the city would have the right to take over the building according to my research. Thank you. I'll hand this in, the 5 pages.
Thank you, and I will just respond for a moment. That's exactly what the city is planning on doing, starting a totally new agency. So, next.
Yes. Robert Burgess.
Mayor and the Common Council, my name is Bob Burgess. I live in South Norwalk. I'm here to speak on the purchase of the South Norwalk Center. Also, I've read a letter from Ernie Dumas to the council, probably we should look at very carefully. But I was in several meetings with the mayor on the makeup of a new board. And in our meeting, it stated that Mount Zion Baptist Church would have a seat on the board. The mayor would appoint a person, which he will designate Darlene, and one person will be appointed by the NAACP. Now, we are in agreement with the concept of the appointment on the new board, but I think where we have questions, and we want you to wait and look at the paperwork that Ernie Dumas gave you, a series of questions, and they're financial questions surrounding the South Norwalk Center expenditures. I think some of the same questions he is asking are the same question was raised about neon expenditure. So I want to make sure that one agency is not treated different than the other. And also in the agreement, if agencies cease to operate programs, they become null and void, just like neon. So I want to make sure there's no double standard for South Norwalk Center and neon. It is stated, I don't know, but it's stated that South Norwalk Center have received in excess of $400,000 in CDBG grant for renovation of the building. Now, whether they was operating programs, we don't know that. We have to see whether they have a 990 filing. If they don't have a 990 filing, that means that they're obsolete. But if they are operating programs, then we want to know what kind of programs operated and where the operating capital come from those operating those programs. Another part, Ernie pointed out that there was $20,000 matched to the CDBG grant. And if they claimed they didn't have no money coming in, how was the $20,000 paid, or was it in-kind service? All these questions should be taken seriously by the Common Council member. You should look at that memo Ernie presented to us, and if all those questions are answered answered in an appropriate way, then I say we should go ahead with the project. But otherwise, if it's not, nobody should move on approving anything until those financial questions are answered about the operation of the South North Center, because we don't want to have another situation like Neon, but yet we are bailing one agency out and did not bail the other agency out for the same deficiencies. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
John Mosby?
Good afternoon, Congress. My name is John Mosby. I would like to speak. I did see in the paper about Neon, and I want to say I used to be one of the board of directors, and I sat there about 10 years. And I want to say this year, I just get sick and tired of everybody talking about what Neon did. We had a lot of councilmen, everybody on that board. And I was one of the finest guys. We told all these guys about this problem. And for some reason, they won't let us get on no board. ABC, they recommend us to get on the board because they were taking a lot of money. Gentlemen, this thing got to stop. We, the community, got to be on these boards too. And they don't think you're picking who you want. The community got, and you put some guys on there going to do some oversight. And I went through bankruptcy, and let me tell you one thing, and I looked at all the documents. There's $1,000, $32,000 been taken. I don't see how this boat. And we used to tell them, Amy Brown, me, Gene Hill, used to tell them, they kicked us off the boat. They allowed us to have them. Now, if you're going to start this new organization, we want some oversight. You taking the taxpayer money. They took millions of dollars. I seen them. The court, I was a part of the suit. And he stopped me because we were going to get, but when you file a suit against them, then you go to, and I'm going to be real quick and I'm going to sit down. Once they do that, they hold everything up. So then after the money, but we looked at all the dollars, there ain't nothing to hide. I don't understand how some people can do wrong in this country and get away with it. If I go there and steal a piece of candy, you give me 5 years. But them people can pick, and let me tell you one thing, this ain't no game plan. I blame the state, I blame Mr. Bremen, all of them up there, they didn't do nothing. Now, if you're gonna open up a new organization, we in the community gonna have a voice. It ain't gonna be who you wanna pick. The law say that the community supposed to have a part of the vote, and we pick who we want with these other agents. If you've been in this taxpayer money, I know the law. So I'm just saying, whatever you do, we wanna be a part of it. If we don't, we're going to go to court. And I'm not trying to threaten nobody, because I'm in court all the time, and I'm doing pretty good. Oh, dog, I'm doing so good now. But I'm just telling you, we want the community to have a voice. We don't have nobody selling people. We pick who you want. That's wrong. So I want to thank y'all, and I want you gentlemen, I'm not against y'all, but y'all got to show responsibility, gentlemen. It's too much wrongdoing in this country. It got to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby.
That's it.
That is all the people that have signed up to address the council. Next item, there are no resignations or appointments this evening. Mayor's remarks. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's on the consent. So under Mayor's remarks, Norwalk Public Schools open tomorrow. We ask everybody to please slow down in school zones. We know that the school zones during the time of school, the speed limit is 20 miles an hour. Keep an eye out for school buses, mainly because we don't want the children injured. We want them to be able to get to and from school safely, but also the fine for passing a stopped school bus with blinking lights is excessive, and I don't think you'd appreciate that. On September 9th, the 18th annual United Ride will take place. Registrations begin at 8:30 at Norden Place, and the ride commences at approximately 11. There'll be hundreds of riders participating, and they will make their way through 10 towns in memory of the first responders lost on 9/11. All funds raised go to support those first responders that were lost, or the families of those first responders. An exciting time of the year. The Norwalk Seaport Oyster Festival is coming up next weekend, the weekend after this. It begins on Friday, September 7th through Sunday, September 9th. It's always a good time. Bring the family down, enjoy the good food and the nonprofits and the crafts, rides for the kids. It's always a huge success. Actually, this is the 41st year of the Oyster Festival. It's hard to believe that 41 years have gone by since we've started having that celebration. Our annual Norwalk 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony will take place on Tuesday, September 11th in the plaza out front of City Hall. The public is invited, where we remember the 14 residents from Norwalk who died in the attack on the World Trade Center. It's always a solemn event. The Common Council is always there and reads the names of the people that we lost. Don't forget to sign up. The Mayor's Golf Tournament is Monday, September 24th. You've probably already heard that the fee is only $99 a person. We're going to have breakfast, lunch. There's going to be an oyster and clam station on the course, thanks to Norm Bloom and Cops Island Oysters. There's also going to be, thanks to Garavel Subaru, a $500 closest to the pin award on the hole number 5. So the person that gets the closest to the pin off the tee will get $500. And we're looking for some other things, but we're looking for golfers. It's limited to 124 golfers. So if you're not signed up and you want to play, you better get moving. Labor Day is coming this Monday. Enjoy the long weekend as we honor the working people across the country. Please, if you're going away, drive safely. Make it a safe one so that we don't have any fatalities on our highways and our streets and roads. Mr. Kaides.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This evening, Mr. Igneri will be reading the consent calendar. Mr. Igneri.
Thank you. On consent, item 7C1, approval of and vote on candidate for controller Chitsame. Okay, thank you. You told me before, and I didn't get it right anyway. Land. Item D1A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, instruments, and amendments necessary to apply for and accept grant funds under the fiscal year 2018 Edward Burns Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, the amount of $36,609. Item 1B, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements, documents, and instruments and amendments thereto as may be necessary to implement all programs through the fiscal year 2018 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant, local solicitation pursuant to such grant funding. Item 2, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into or amend contractual instruments in the name and on behalf of the City of Norwalk with the State of Connecticut Office of Early Childhood for the purpose of the Child Day Care Program operated by the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Item D3, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents related to the contract number 180ECCDC01 NWK with the State of Connecticut Office of Early Childhood for the 2018-2020 Child Day Care Program to be funded by the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Item 4, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute sub-grant agreements between the City of Norwalk and 1, Stepping Stones Museum for Children, Inc., 2, Growing Seeds 2 Child Development Center, Inc., at Ben Franklin Center, 3, Odyssey Learning, Inc., at Nathaniel Ely Center, and 4, Connecticut Institute for Communities, Inc., for funding under the Child Day Care Program for the provision of child care services in accordance with the Office of Early Childhood Purchase of Services Contract Number 180ECCDC01 NWK.
Thank you, Mr. Igneri. If there are no objections, I will now call for a vote. Seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent calendar as read, please raise your hand to signify yes. This will be unanimous. Mr. Mayor, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kites. Before we move on to the regular agenda, I would like to call down Chichime Lam and have her come to the podium, introduce herself. She will be the new comptroller in the finance department. I know that she was interviewed extensively by Bob Barron, by Ray Burney, Alicia King, and and we found her to be a worthy candidate, somebody that we're excited to have on board, and I think she's going to be a wonderful contribution to our team. So.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and good evening, everybody. My name is Chichime Lam. I started in public accounting over 10 years ago, started with the firm Gladry, now they're called RSM US, and focus on governmental accounting. After that, I went to Town of Stratford as an assistant finance director for 5 years, and I am excited to be here and starting next week at the City of Norwalk.
Thank you and welcome aboard. Does anybody have any questions? Or?
The Personnel Committee approved Chichime. I think the resume is really excellent, and I think we're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Welcome aboard. Okay, the next item on the agenda, item 7A1 and 2, Mr. Burnett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The two items listed under the Finance Committee basically focus on reallocating $5 million in the facilities master plan, and the $5 million would be allocated towards specific projects related to Norwalk High School. We've reviewed the list of required and needed items at Norwalk High School with their building committee, and the principal, Reginald Roberts, is here today, and he provided us with a detailed list of those items that are needed. The overall net of this activity would be reducing the present allocation or appropriation for the Jefferson School project, which will not occur in the near future, the date to be determined. So we would be reducing the Jefferson project by $5 million and reappropriating the $5 million towards the master plan that will be earmarked for Norwalk High School. So this is moving dollars to a much needed project. Those that have driven by Norwalk High School have seen some of the work so far. It's no longer all cement. It's now green and gray, and it's a great school. Looking school, let me put it that way, but it's also a great school. That's the net of it. I don't know if there's any.
You're moving those items?
Yes, so at this point, I'll move the items. I don't know if any other members of the Finance Committee wish to make any comments.
We have Principal Roberts, we have Mr. Hamilton, and we have Alan Lowe here. If there are any questions as to the reason, Mr. Hempstead.
Yeah, and I apologize, I was away for the Finance Committee when this was brought up, so I didn't get to ask the questions. I just want to make sure I understand totality, the lack of term end game. We're taking $5 million from Jefferson, all right? So that project basically has no funding to speak of. We're not applying it toward the $12.6 million deficits that we have in the other two projects. We're then in turn taking this and adding it to the money that we've already given to Norwalk High School for certain improvements. Is that the correct assumption? So in essence,
Hamilton, would you come down?
So in essence, the school building plan in totality is something like about $12.6 million short?
That is a figure that's still being determined. I think the 12.6 million number was an early estimate that, and Alan Lowe can probably speak to this as well, but that had been put together several months ago. The Ponus Ridge project and the Nathaniel Ely project are moving forward. Design work is continuing on those, and at some point during the process, we will determine whether or not those projects need additional appropriations or not. I don't think we can say with certainty. Maybe Alan's prepared to say with certainty, but I haven't heard that we have a definitive number. There was an early projection that probably is where your 12 point some odd million dollar number is coming from. That included, though, this $5 million for Norwalk High School. So I think the numbers were, at the time, again, several months ago, in the range of $4 million potential shortfall at Ponus, $4 million potential shortfall at Nathaniel Ely, and then the $5 million request here, getting us, up into this $12 million range number. So where, I guess, sort of big picture, where we are on this is, the district is certainly committed to moving forward with all three of those projects. We're here tonight to talk about Norwalk High School. We have a committee that has been working diligently for the past year. The original allocation that was set aside for Norwalk High School was pegged at $6.5 million, and it's been determined that we simply can't get everything done that needs to be done at Norwalk High School with that original $6.5 million, that we need an additional $5 million in order to undertake all of the improvements that need to happen at that school. In terms of where this is going is we know that Jefferson is going to be somewhat delayed. The appropriation was put in place for Jefferson really before it was actually needed. We do expect to go forward with the Jefferson project, but we don't need the funding in place for Jefferson right now. The appropriation that had been made for Jefferson was $24 million. And so that project, though, has to take place in sequence, essentially, with the Ponus Ridge project, because there are a number of steps that have to take place. The Ponus addition has to be built, and then the current existing Ponus students would move into that newly built addition at Ponus and use it as swing space while renovation work occurs on the main campus of Ponus. And then they would move back to their space in the main building, and then, and only then, would students then be moving over from Jefferson over to, some of the students would move over from Jefferson over to that newly constructed space at Ponus. Bottom line is it pushes out when we will be able to start construction on Jefferson for several years, and so we don't need the appropriation that's currently in place for Jefferson. We do in fact need it for Norwalk High School, and so we consider this really to be a temporary use of those Jefferson funds for the purpose of doing what needs to be done at Norwalk High School. We do expect to be back for a funding request for the full amount necessary to do a renovate as new project at Jefferson. There's no doubt that Jefferson needs major renovation work, and that does need to be part of the long-range plan for the district and the city, but we don't need those funds appropriated for Jefferson right now.
Mr. Hempstead.
We've been here before, and actually, if I remember correctly, you were on the other side of the equation. At one point, the school system got a total allocation. The total number escapes me at the time, $136 million, I think is when they did the addition of Ryan McMahon. And at that point, they kept taking money from one project and move it to another project because they saw more immediate need. So at the end of the day, they spent the allocated funds, and they still had a list of things they wanted to get done with no money because they decided to move the money to projects they deemed more important than the others. Right now, it seems like we have the same case, where we're moving funds around of the total allocation that was given for the school system with deficits needing to at some point be addressed. I don't see them fully being able to call out all the dollars on the two projects, Nathaniel Lane, yet that's a tidy sum of money to try and call out of a project. Is that the picture we have right now?
Well, I mean, I would phrase it a little differently. I think what we have is we have a, allocation of approximately $130 million of local funding that has been approved by the council, and the district is moving forward with badly needed renovation work and new school work at a number of facilities and a number of sites around the city. That $130 million does not address all of the needs of the district, though. I mean, the facilities study that was originally put together pegged the recommended improvements for the district at about $250 million. And so, but that was suggested over a 10-year period. The $130 million that was appropriated was over a 5-year period. So, I think what it's suggesting is that the needs, absolutely, the capital needs of the school system are very great. You can see it in many of our buildings. It's not one or two buildings, it's many of our buildings need a lot of work. And so what I'm suggesting is that, yes, the district does expect to be needing to come back for additional capital appropriations in future years that extend beyond the $130 million. But there is some opportunity to, again, extend that period that those projects take place. The original 5-year period, we're already, I guess we now just started the 3rd year of that 3-year time frame that was part of the original 5-year time frame we were looking at. So, time marches on, and as time marches on, the city does have new capacity to take on additional debt as existing debt is retired going forward. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that, as we develop and update our 5-year capital plan this year and every year going forward, we're going to need to take into account the fact that the original $130 million does not do everything that needs to be done in the school system.
But in that $130 million, was it anticipated to spend another $5 million beyond what was appropriated for Norwalk High School in the 5-year plan?
The question.
In totality, it was $130 million. I voted for it, so I'm there. I'm trying to understand with this additional $5 million for Norwalk High School, was that allocated within that $130 million, or is this above and beyond what was originally allocated?
The additional $5 million request is beyond the original.
So it was not
allocation.
anticipated in a 5-year plan.
Correct.
$130 million. Okay,
This was developed after the committee was formed and looked at all the needs in the building and concluded that $5 million was not going to be sufficient to do everything that needed to be done.
You mean $130 million was not sufficient?
The 6.5.
Wait, Mr. Hempstead, are you finished?
The 6.5 million that had been allocated for Norwalk High would not be sufficient to do everything that needed to be done. That 6.5 million was part of the 130 million.
So we're still back to a shortfall of at least $5 million, and depending on what happens with Nathaniel Ely, Columbus additions.
Right. I mean, I would think you have to basically understand that a capital plan is always going to be an evolving document, that the numbers that were developed were not put together with detailed architectural plans that have been developed and so on. And even as you go forward and take a project forward into detailed design and bidding, you can run into shortfalls at that stage as well. You may have, with the best intentions, believe that you've got the money necessary to do a project. You go out to bid, and sometimes you're going to come in, under budget. Sometimes you may come in over budget. So there's always uncertainty in these numbers. There's always the requirement to be prepared to make adjustments to the plan as you go forward.
I understand that, but then this 5 million is outside of the 5-year plan. So, I mean, we went well beyond the scope of the original presentation from the Board of Education of what they needed for funding within the next 5 years. I understand that. I do some of this for a living, so I understand that, cost overruns and all that, but this kind of was, to me, a reach. I'm not saying things don't need to be in Norwalk High School. Trust me, my kids went there, and I used to go in that building, and I'm like everybody else, has an opinion of a building that supposedly won design awards. How, I'll never know. But in the same token, to kind of put everything else that was in the 5-year plan behind this and move this in front of the additional money that was already appropriated, I have long-term concerns because it seems like we're pushing it down the road. What really needs to be done with no certainty of the cost overruns on the projected sum that we anticipate to spend on Nathaniel Lely, on Ponus Ridge, and eventually on Columbus School. And that's what concerns me, rather than hang on to the 5 million. Thank you, Mom.
Mr. Corsello. Mr. Ioannidis.
I just wanted to make sure I got your first question correct. So you're concerned with that 12.6 million estimate? Does this $5 million help offset that?
This 5 million is part of that 12.6 million.
So this would reduce it to, let's say, 7.6?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Kaitis.
Mr. Hamilton, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there was some recent state legislation that helped with some of the reimbursement of these projects to the city. Is that correct?
Yes, there is some recent special state legislation that helps not only the Norwalk High project, but also helps with the West Rocks Windows project. And that special legislation, sponsored by Senator Duff, did provide one of the uncertainties that we ran into on the Norwalk High project. The consultant had originally recommended refinishing doors and wood paneling. You may, if you know the school, you know there's that sort of old-looking wood paneling down the hallways, and it was determined that there was a small amount of PCBs sort of embedded in those doors and in that paneling. And so instead of, we can't refinish under that circumstance because that would then potentially release, harmful substances into the environment. So those doors and paneling, that needs to be replaced with something new. And so there's additional cost associated with that work. Believe it took the estimated cost of that element of the project from something like $60,000 to $600,000, and the special legislation is going to provide that the district is going to, and the city is going to receive 100% reimbursement on that work up to $600,000. So instead of getting the normal reimbursement that we would have expected of 32%, we're going to get 100% on that. And likewise, we also had run into some hazardous materials in the window replacement project at West Rocks, and we will also be getting a greater reimbursement on that project as well. Or I should say the city will be getting greater reimbursement on that project as well.
As a graduate of Norwalk High School, I'm not trying to date myself, but like cassettes were still being used. And I have an incoming freshman to Norwalk High School, and I had an opportunity to take a tour, and I could tell you that school is really showing its age. From the auditorium to leaks, I mean, I know it's not the prettiest building to begin with, but I'm looking forward to these improvements. And thank you, Principal Roberts, and the School Governance Council for bringing all these issues to light.
Further discussion? Mr. Hempstead.
I just want to clarify the question. Yeah. My question was, the $5 million you're taking out of Jefferson and put in Norwalk High School, then anticipates Jefferson will not be done for at least 5 years plus?
No. I think we would expect to start Jefferson before that 5-year period is up, but the schedule for completion will be out in, at this point, the completion date that we're working with is, I think I have those figures here. Sorry. I know I had that here a moment ago. And, here we are. So we would be, at this point, looking to be in construction in 2021-22 and 22-23 with occupancy in 23-24 for Jefferson.
So with it,
Designing in 2020-21.
so you will need the money within 5 years.
We expect to, but we don't need the money now. It's several years out, and it's at the end of that original. Remember, the 5-year period started. We're now in the third year of the 5-year period, the original 5-year period.
So there is a shortfall within that period that you're moving the money around. You're moving the money around. You're not expending it, but that project on the total rehab of school buildings is short.
Well, we would expect to be
You're
back.
taking it out. I mean,
We expect to be back for funding requests to fund the full renovation project at Jefferson. But we don't need that money in 1920, or I'm sorry, in 1819, because it's not going to go really into serious design until probably 2020.
Can you explain to me the special legislation that got us seemingly a ton of money? And are we eligible in any other projects for this?
No, that applies. It's special legislation that applies specifically to those projects.
Really?
Yes.
Has that happened before?
I don't have all the history. Special legislation does get passed periodically, and so it's certainly not unheard of.
No, well, I know that, but I don't ever remember the school project getting this kind of attention where 10 times the amount of allocation. Okay. But only offered to certain schools and not offered carte blanche.
Yeah, the 100% reimbursement is not on the entire project, of course. It's only on the portion of the project that's related to this environmental remediation.
Yeah, for the last, 35 years, we never applied for a special the state legislation for projects. This is the first time.
Okay. I answered that. Thank you.
I just want to add one other thing. We are going forward. We're hiring an architect to do very preliminary phase for Jefferson in the near future so that we get a better idea what the cost of those projects is going to be. So at this point, when we developed the budget for Jefferson about 2 years ago, we don't have any plans, we don't have any survey or anything on the building, generally speaking. So we are moving forward so we get better information so that we can project what the project is going to cost in much more detail than just say, $350 or $500 a square foot. So we will be getting information and then be in a better position to do cost estimating.
But in reality, you're leaving somebody else, some of the council, could be some of the mayor, whatever, holding a situation where there was funding for a renovation and now there's none.
There's two other points.
The future is going to be holding it back.
Two other points I want to bring up. One thing you mentioned previously, about back in 2000s, the city spent $70 million of city money plus $20 million of state money to implement a school improvement project. I believe at that time the estimated project cost about $150 million. So we were only able to come up with $90 million to do improvements. So what we did is we took all the projects, the highest reimbursable scope. So we did all the reimbursable items back in 2000s. So knowingly that at some point in the future, there's additional work to be done. So like Norwell High School, we spent $42 million back in 2000s, recognizing the fact that a lot of stuff still hasn't been done yet. So that's why we're looking at it now. It's the condition it is now. So at some point we got to hit those projects that, certain thing that was acceptable back 10 years ago or 15 years ago, now it becomes a critical item to be repaired. So it's always that we never had enough money to do all the improvement we're looking for. So we take all the priority items and then look in the future, another 5 or 10 years later, those items that are left behind have to be taken care of. And also Jefferson, a lot of the kids is going to be moving, after we finish the addition at Ponus, a lot of the kids will be moving into the new elementary Ponus school, elementary portion of the Ponus school project. So the pressure on Jefferson get relieved a little bit because we no longer need the portables, and the population at that school will drop quite a bit. So the pressure is taking off a little bit, so we can buy a little time in a nice way.
I'm torn here, because to take advantage of $600,000 versus $60,000 is really hard to pass up on. And I know Norwalk High School well enough to know that a lot of those things should have been addressed with the addition that we did with the science wing that we put on that building, or on the list back in those days. But I hate, in the same token, create a void that's got to be funded at some point in the future that was planned on to happen now with no. And we have two other schools that, if we want to complete them, within supposedly, but I guess that time frame's not going to happen either. For Nathaniel Ely, not in the next 2 years. For year 3, you're not going to be finishing within the first 5 years, that's for sure. I'm just saying, I'm a little bit torn here. I just wanted to understand some of the facts. Thank you for your indulgence.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? I think it's unanimous, right? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a motion, may I have a motion to go into executive session for item 7B1?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, did we vote on items 1 and 2?
I'm sorry? I believe so, yes. We moved them together.
Taking them both together.
Yeah. So item 7B1 in executive session, motion?
So moved.
Mr. Livingston moves to go into executive session. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So carries. Here we are. About to move the motion. Okay, we're out of executive session. During executive session, no motions were made, no votes were taken. Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move the item and then speak to it. Item B1, authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute the purchase and sales agreement with South Norwalk Community Center, Inc. to purchase a 1/2 interest in the property at 98 South Main Street, South Norwalk, Connecticut. I have a couple stipulations I want to add, but I also want to talk what the order should be on this. Let me give you the stipulations I'd like to add to this. I don't know if this is constant amendments or what, but first off, that if approved, that no funding be delivered to South Norwalk Community Center, Inc. Unless and until Corporation Council has confirmed that the new board is fully constituted and in place. Secondly, a stipulation would be that we before closing, the Corporation Council receives a good standing certificate evidencing that the South Norwalk Community Center, Inc. is an active business. And finally, that the lease to be signed with South Norwalk Community Center be, once negotiated, be returned to the council for approval. With that, I just want to make a couple comments. I think the current situation is untenable. It's just, we have a deteriorating asset, which the city has 1/2 ownership, but 100% of the ownership of any problems that come about. And I think that that's not a situation that can work for the city and subjects us to a lot of potential liabilities. And there's been a suggestion that we wait, if you will, till the South Norwalk Community Center, Inc. is in the same situation as Neon was. But I think we've been discussed that point, and I think that is not a realistic approach, for one thing, and most importantly, waiting for the bankruptcy court to act, if it ever even got there, could take many years. And as I said, this is a deteriorating asset, and I don't think we can afford to wait. And I just also think it's really important that we all understand that this is essentially a new entity. It has the same name, it is the same legal entity, but it has an entirely new board. Nobody from the existing board will be serving on this, and so it's really a different, it's the same entity, but it's different. The only thing that can really prove this would be a different name, and that has been suggested, but this is an entirely different group of people running the operation. And with that, I support this motion with the stipulations I've added.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 13-2. Thank you. Mr. Hempstead or Mr. Igneri?
Adjourn?
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.